What's going on, everybody? It is the coach, Greg Adams, and thanks again for joining me on Bounce Back, the podcast, only on iTunes and Google Play. Today, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to talk specifically about the next thing that you have to do. On the last podcast, we talked about change and how change requires you to get naked. Today, we're going to talk about taking the leap. Taking the leap and starting the actual process of change. In the last podcast, we talked about getting naked. Now, if you're still naked from the last podcast, I want you guys to put your clothes back on. If you guys are still naked and listening to this next podcast, that's going to be up to you, but you don't have to be. You can go ahead and put your clothes back on. But today, we're going to talk about taking the leap and how to prepare for the change. Before we get started, I'm going to share an issue with you guys that I'm dealing with today. And the issue is the conflict between me and my daughter in social media. Now, as you guys know, I love social media, and you'll have a hard time finding people that talks about loving social media. Now, I think it is not the poison to our society as most people think it is. It is the new way of our society. Does it make things different? Yes. Is it different in the way that we grew up? Yes. Do old people not like social media for the most part? Yes. But right now, with the use of social media, we're able to reach so many more people and get so much more information. It is amazing. It's an amazing tool, and when used properly, it can be very, very good for you. Now, for young people, social media is a way of life, and I want you guys to think about when we were kids, and most of the people that are probably listening to this podcast, when we were children, the way of life for us was television. Television was pretty much a new thing. It only had been around for 20, 30 years for the masses of people. But it was normal for us. It had always been around for us. And you can remember how people talked about the television. They always talked about the idiot box. It's a waste of time. It's going to ruin your mind. Blah, blah, blah. And these were typically older people. But now, television for younger people is not a big deal. Matter of fact, if you can think about it, kids do not watch television. They don't watch television programming. They don't sit in front of the TV at 8 o'clock waiting for their favorite show like we did when we were young. Now they have YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, Facebook, if they still use that, if younger people still use that. But they do have access to it. They have access to things that we don't even know about. Video games are a bigger thing to them now than it was to us, because it was at the beginning stages for us. Atari was new to us. But now for them, these things have been around ever since they were born. So it is nothing new to them. They pretty much have adapted to it. Now back to the conflict with my daughter, myself, and social media. Since I love social media, it is a difficult thing now to have my daughter, who is 12 years old, request so much access to social media. Can social media be a danger? Yes, because I think if you're not prepared for it and you have overexposure to it, it could lead to some problems mentally or with self-esteem or with too much access to information in a small window. You're too young and you're receiving all of this information, or you're able to access things that are not age appropriate, and it could be detrimental to how they perceive relationships or how they perceive the world. So today, my daughter texts me because I only have 50-50 custody with her, so I don't see her on certain days. So today, my daughter texts me from class, which is crazy. They got phones in class, but some teachers allow it, and said, can she have Twitter? Now, I'm going to give you guys a little bit of a backstory. She just got the app Snapchat. And it took her probably a year and a half to 2 years for me to give her that access to that application. Because, for the adults, we knew what Snapchat was when it first started. That was the way to send news to each other and, make them disappear. But Snapchat is like a mainstream app now. They have news, they have reports, they have, it's more silly. They have those little things where it's mostly women use it. They put their face in front of it and then it makes them a deer, or they put a crown on their head and they change their skin tone and the color of their eyes. They have those filters that you can put over your face. So it really attracts, females are attracted to that type of thing. So she just got Snapchat, I want to say maybe a month ago, after a long fight between me and her for that. And before that, I would say a year ago, Instagram, I gave them access to Instagram, her and my son. So she had Instagram, and at that time she could choose between having text message or Instagram. So she chose to have Instagram and not access to text messaging. But then I relented and gave her access to texting and Instagram. A year or so later, it was Snapchat. And not even a month later, here is the request for Twitter. The request from Twitter came from her teacher. As she was sitting in class, her teacher said, hey, okay, she's at a middle school that shares the same campus with the high school. So the high school sports and all of their teams they all have different accounts that you can go on and follow their schedule and posts and etc. So her teacher recommended to the entire class that they have Twitter so they can access all the school's posts and they can attend the events and support the school. So here we are now. I'm having to try to balance my 12-year-old's access to all of this social media. But now, since she's in the middle school, she's going to be growing, and this is going to be the process that I'm dealing with in these next couple of days, dealing with my daughter, myself, and social media, and my conflict between what I think is the greatness of social media and what I think is probably the detriment of social media, and trying to balance that with a 12-year-old female. That ought to be fun. So, yeah, man, it's going to be a lot going on with that, and I just got to figure out how to make it work. But you know me, I will have a plan. I will think about it. I will deliberate, and I will execute. That's just the way I do it, and I will execute to the best of my ability. All right, so let's get into what we're talking about today. Taking the leap. Taking the leap. How to prepare for change. Now, my story. Now, you guys know, I'm going to be a little repetitive if you've listened to this podcast already. Some of you guys will start at this podcast and then not have any background. So I want to repeat a little bit of what this podcast is all about. This podcast is about my story, becoming a college basketball coach, becoming a head coach, following my dream, investing the time only for that dream to end in disaster and me failing at that particular career. I led the last team that I coached to a winless season. And in that process, knowing that that was going to come, I decided to change my career and move my family to another place. But that change required me to be homeless. That change required me to live in my car for 6 months. And I navigate this story from coaching on the sideline in that last game, attempting to win and save myself and my reputation, into the next week living in my car, which was a very humbling experience. And it is an experience that is all too familiar with a lot of people in our country. Unfortunately, not a lot of people are able to rebound from that. And that's why I call this the Bounce Back podcast. So knowing what's going to happen at the end of this season, I'm going to be winless. I'm going to change my career. I'm telling my family, which consisted of my wife, my children, who were very young, so they really didn't care or understand what was about to happen, telling them and preparing them. And it is necessary that you prepare your friends and family for what's about to happen, because it's not going to be an easy process. You don't have to tell them everything, but you do have to tell them that a change or a shift is coming and that you're planning for it. Now, I have been planning for this particular change, this particular shift, for more than a year. And as a matter of fact, I allowed individuals to talk me out of doing it. And at that time, it was my wife. But she has a very large family. And a lot of times, the information that I share with her, she would share with them. And then those individuals would share information back to her, and she would relay that back to me with her fear and essentially talk me out of making that leap earlier than I wanted to. But here's what's important. If you have family and friends, you prepare them. But this is where I want to caution you. This is going to be an important step. This is what defeats most people from starting their particular business or making their change before they even make it. And we don't know how many people would have made it, or how many millionaires, or how many successful business people there would be if they didn't get out of the blocks because someone talked them out of it. Number one, you plan, you plan, you plan. You are in the planning stage. You don't plan for 2 months. You plan for a year. You plan for 2 years. You always are planning actually when you're in the work that you're doing. You could be planning this out. You plan, you research, you test, you implement it, you execute. You make sure that you have everything in order and every little possibility that can go wrong in order before you even get out there. The one thing that's going to make people fearful of you that are close to you is that you haven't planned enough. They're already going to assume you don't know what you're doing. So you're going to create a lot of fear by not planning. And if they don't know that you're going to do and make this move, you're going to create a lot of fear. And that fear potentially could hurt you because they're going to talk you out of your goal. They're going to think that you didn't do what it took to make this thing happen. Now, one of my favorite recording artists is the Notorious B.I.G. If you grew up in the 90s, he was known as Biggie Smalls from the Bad Boy record label. He had a song called The 10 Crack Commandments, and it was about crack dealers and what they should do if you're considering getting a business, what you should or shouldn't do in relationship to making your business work. And this is what I've done. I've taken that song and made the 10 entrepreneurial commandments. I posted that video on my YouTube channel. But what I'm going to talk about is one of the commandments that I've made. And one of the commandments in his song was never let them know your next move. And then I basically took that one and say, never let them know your next move. Never discuss what you're going to do step by step with any individual because they are not required to know. All they're required to know is that there's going to be a change. They're going to ask you questions. They're going to ask you if you thought of this, as you thought of that. Okay. You don't have to answer any of those questions. Now, if it's somebody really close to you, you may discuss with them a little bit about what you're going to do, but they don't need to know each and every step because each and every step requires a million questions and you don't have time to answer all of those questions. So one of the entrepreneurial commandments is never let them know your next move. Now, they're going to offer you advice, but their advice is going to be so shitty that it's almost useless to even listen to them because their advice is going to be fear-based. And what they're going to do is try to get you to do something a little bit less so that the change doesn't hurt. But I'm going to tell you guys, just like getting naked and running through the mall is going to hurt. It's going to hurt your ego. It's going to hurt your reputation. It's going to hurt how you appear as a business person. However, it's going to be pretty freeing. Okay? It's going to be pretty freeing and it's going to relieve you of a lot of fear. So let's talk about the 6 reactions that you're going to get from your family and friends when you tell them that you're going to make the change, when you tell them that you're taking the leap. The number one thing that they're going to ask you or tell you, they're going to tell you, don't do it. This is simple. Everybody knows that. They're going to tell you up and down, around the clock, don't do it. I had a friend that did that. They couldn't do it. They didn't make it. Don't move to this state. The state's in bankruptcy. They're in a recession. Don't do it now, because if you do it now, this is going to happen. You're going to hear, don't do it. And the reason why they're saying it is because they don't want you to fail. I want to tell you guys something. If you are not starting a business because you're going to fear that it fails, then you're going to always be working for someone else. That's just the bottom line. You're just not going to learn what it takes to be a business owner, because that's going to require failure. And failure is going to teach you guys how to do the next business right. Every step along the way, you can read any book. Any book's going to tell you this. Any person that has a business, any successful business person, I'm talking about a truly, truly successful business person on a high level, is going to tell you that they failed, they screwed up, they messed it up. Your job is to not fall for that fear factor, that fear tactic. Failure is a part of the process. Now, if you have a home and a very high mortgage, you got car payments, and you got young children, then your level of risk is very high, because you're going to need a lot of capital to begin with. So I can see where that fear is going to come from. Now, if you have planned for this, you have tested it out, then you're going to be able to have a little more success earlier, so that you can make your mortgage payment, you can make your car payment. But if you're just going to start off and you have that high level of risk, you're going to have a lot of people. You're going to have a lot of people fearful of what you're about to do, and they're going to tell you don't do it. If you can get past that, then you got the next second thing on the list that they're going to tell you that they're going to do. And number 2 is they're going to tell you to minimize your risk. They're going to tell you to do it on a lower scale. Now, remember, these individuals have not planned. They haven't researched, they haven't tested, they haven't implemented. They have never done what you're about to do. And if you're lucky enough to have a family member doing what you want to do, then I would probably link up with them. And you always remember this rule. You're only going to listen to someone that you would trade places with in that moment. So if you won't trade places with that person in that moment, then their advice means squat. Their questions mean squat. Okay? But what they're going to tell you is to do it on a lower scale. In my particular situation, so let's relate it to me. In my particular situation, I was going from being a head coach at a university to saying I'm going to start a fitness strength and conditioning program in a very upper scale area, and I'm going to live there and work there. Now, what they said was, why don't you move to a very low income area so you can afford the rent? And why don't you teach classes at the YMCA, do some boot camps in the park, and X, Y, Z. Now, to me, that was a lower scale approach. That was minimizing the risk. Moving into a low income area, my clientele may not have access to the money. So what I'm going to do is work for what would be about $15 a session, and then hope enough people can afford it where I can do boot camps, mass cattle calls in the park every day and deal with what comes with that. For me, I knew what that would take, and I had already planned and researched for that, and I knew that that wasn't something that I wanted to do. So number 2, they're going to tell you to minimize the risk. They're going to tell you to do it on a lower scale so that you don't have as much risk involved. Maybe move in with a family member and have all your families in that area, and that's not the area that is going to make the business work. So that's minimizing the risk. But they're offering you advice, but it's fear-based advice. Number 3, they're going to recommend that you do it part-time, that you do your business part-time. Now, one thing that I know, there's a book called The One Thing by Gary Keller, and it talks about focusing on one thing, and that you can't focus on too many other things because that one thing is going to be effective, or it's going to be affected. And it is the same approach that you have when people say, do it part-time and work at the grocery store and bag groceries, or work at the shipping yard and do that in the middle of the night and then start your business. Well, how is that going to work? How can you possibly be successful at something when you're only giving it half of your attention. It can't work. Now, if anybody out there is trying to start a business, what I would tell you guys is before you make that leap, that you test it out. You test out to see if you would be successful at that. And you do it a little bit here, you do a little bit there. But you're doing this before you actually take the leap. Now, once you take the leap, you got to be all in. That is my suggestion. And that is the only thing that I can tell you guys, man, that I'm definite on. If you do it half-assed, you're going to get half-assed results. You can't do it part-time. You got to be all in. You can't leap from the mountain halfway and keep one foot on the cliff. You got to go all in and take that leap. You can't get halfway naked. You got to make that change. All right, the next thing they're going to tell you, or the next thing response that you're going to get is once they know you're going to actually jump, is that they're going to close their eyes and they're going to ignore you. They're going to ignore what you're doing because obviously for me, I use social media. I use videos. I was doing a lot of things in public to let them know that this is going down. All right. And so they knew it was going down. They saw the process beginning to start. And what they do is they'll shut down and they will ask and see. They will ask you questions to see how you're doing. Oh, how's your business going? All right. But that's about as deep as they'll go. They might suggest, well, why don't you teach at the YMCA? All right. In the middle of all of that. But you don't want to let them know your next move. For the most part, they'll ignore you. They're not going to be your clients. They're not going to be your circle of influence. They're not going to be the first people who start paying you because they know you from who you were. They don't know you for who you want to be. So you're telling them in any career. I remember I have a real estate license and a lot of people would tell me, start with your circle of influence. Well, your circle of influence just knew you were, flipping hamburgers over here at the McDonald's. They don't know that you over here starting your new business and you're a business person for this. They don't respect you for that yet. So they're not going to be willing to take that leap with you. They're not going to do their home loan with you after you've just been dropping fries the previous week. Okay. They're not going to sign up to be a high-ranking client in your personal training business after they knew you were just doing some other business. So I would start and build your reputation out in the public because what they're going to do, again, they're going to close their eyes. They're going to ignore you. They're not going to like your social media posts. They may tell you to stop posting on social media. They're not going to be involved in your business. So don't assume that they will. Sorry, if your volume changes, I just moved the mic away, so I apologize for that. But I thought I was getting a little too hot on the mic. Okay? But they're going to require you. They're actually going to be the human fire extinguisher in your particular life. And I'm going to do a podcast about that. The human fire extinguisher these are individuals who tell you to stop doing what you're doing because it's putting a lot of light on you and you're in an advantage situation. And these are people who can't do what you're doing. So they're going to try to put the fire out in you. They're not going to better themselves. These people are going to put your fire out. And they don't like seeing you getting hot. They don't like seeing you working it. So in this particular situation, they're going to close their eyes. They're going to ignore you. They're going to watch a little bit from the side, all right, and see, oh, okay, he's doing it. They got a little bit started. Okay, well, you got a couple clients. Oh, okay, he's paying the rent. Oh, he moved. He got a better place. Oh, he got a new car. All right, man, he got a lot of clients. He's getting a lot of attention. A lot of people are liking his posts. Oh, he got 1,000 likes. He got 8,000 subscribers on YouTube. All right, they're going to keep watching you as you grow. Because if you remember, this is going to be from their perspective. They're going to remember they told you don't do it. They told you to do it on a lower scale. They told you to do it part-time. They told you now all of a sudden they're looking at you getting hot. And they're not going to like it. A few of your family members will, and these are going to be distant family, but for the most part, they're not going to like it. because they told you don't do it. Okay, the next thing that's going to happen is they're going to ask you for the hookup. Okay, they're going to saw you. They saw you got hot. They saw it. They didn't like it. But at some point, they're like, well, since he's doing it, let me ask him for some advice. Let me ask him for some business. But they're not going to want to pay you because they remember the old you. They remember the person who didn't have any clients. And they're going to assume you're desperate for business, that you'll take any business. But by the time they ask for that hookup, you already took off. You are already killing it. And you have no time or interest to give them anything on any discount level. Now, can you help them? Absolutely. You should help them if you're able to, if you have the time and they respect your service and what you're providing. They respect your business. Now, there's a line in the movie Man on Fire by Denzel Washington, and I'll never forget it. He was a bodyguard for a drug syndicate, and he was kind of old and put out the pasture, but he was very good. People respected what he did, but he was kind of old and losing his skills and losing his desire to do the job. Well, a family hired him, but they lowballed him on the price. And he's sitting in the car and he's very calm, cool, and collected. And the person gave him the offer. It was a lowball. Now, he was not in the best place, but he wanted to take the job at the end of the day. So he took the job, but he said this line. He said, the service will be on par with the pay. The service will be on par with the pay. That means whatever you're paying me, that's the level of service that I'm going to give you. That's what you give to lowball individuals. Now, some people, when you're starting off, that's not how you're going to start off. That's another podcast. When you're starting off, you're going to make sure you do the best you can for everyone because you need that dime. But as you've already built your service, as you already built your reputation in your business, and someone comes and lowballs you and you take a lowball offer from a friend, from a family, you let them know that the service will be on par with the pay. You're not going to give them the same amount of service that you would give a higher level client. And these are the individual, and this is what they're going to do to you as you've already built your reputation in your business. All right, the sixth thing that they're going to do and final thing that they're going to do is they're going to celebrate you. And they're going to ask how you did it, how you hung in there. They're going to be amazed. They're going to celebrate you well after everyone else has celebrated you. They're going to want to hire you well after everyone else has hired you. They're going to ask how you did it because they're going to wish that they did it. It may take 2 years for them to get to this point. It may take 4. It may take 8. It may take 10. They're going to use things like, oh, you're lucky because. They're going to forget what happened and what you did and what you sacrificed to get to that level. They're going to essentially turn from a hater to a celebrator. And that's what you want. You want them to get to that point. And you wanted them to be at that point since the very beginning. But as you know, most family members and friends aren't there. They're going to celebrate you well after you become accomplished. You're going to have a book out. You're going to have appeared on television. You're going to have major clients celebrate you on a regular basis on social media. They're going to have to wait until you have 10,000 subscribers on YouTube. They're going to wait till you have your own podcast. They're going to wait till it's going to be too late by the time they celebrate you. Because they didn't come in the area of love. They didn't come in the area of support. They came as a hater. Now they're a celebrator. You allow them to celebrate your success. But you always remember they told you initially to not do it. And now that it's too late, hey, they can be one of your followers. they could be one of your celebrators. All right, that's going to be the end of today's podcast. I want to thank you guys for listening in to the third installment of the podcast. And I'm going to continue, and I'm going to get better myself because I really enjoy this process. It's just me talking to the microphone in my computer, but hopefully I'm talking to someone that appreciates the message. What I'm going to add to this podcast later on is a book recommendation because I do read and devour a lot of books. And some of these books may help you along with the process. Another thing that I'm going to evolve to with this podcast is interviews. I believe interviews are very, very highly successful for podcasts. And I want to bring in individuals who have gone through what I've gone through to become what we've become. Whether they had to go homeless, whether they had to go through a divorce, whether they lost family, whether they've gone through any significant change and have come out successful forward. That's what we're going to add to this podcast. But that's coming along later. We have a few more podcasts that I want to talk about with my story. And then we'll get to that next level. All right. Thanks again. And I wish you guys a beautiful day. Peace.